The prince stopped his own wedding before the veil came off. 300 people were standing in that hall. The drums had stopped. The bride was in front of him in white cloth and gold. Her hands folded, her face covered the way custom demanded until the moment of the vow, and Prince Adwile did not lift it. He stood there and looked at the veiled woman for a long moment, and then he said, loudly enough for the whole hall to hear, "Before I lift this, I want to ask you one question." There was a murmur. "This is not part of the ceremony. Nothing about this is part of the ceremony. A year ago," he said, "on a road outside your village, I asked a woman her name 3 times. He paused. The 3rd time, "What did you say to me?" And the bride said nothing. Her mother, standing beside her, in fine cloth, said quickly, "My prince, she is only shy. I am not asking you." The silence in that hall went on far too long, and it was still going on when a girl, 40 paces away, sat down on the floor of a grain store behind the kitchen with her back against the door somebody had locked from the outside. Her name was Temilade. She was 19. She had gone to that door twice already and pushed at it and understood, quite calmly, that she was not going to the wedding. She was wearing the only thing she owned, a worn wrapper on her head, and it was not a whole wrapper, it was half of one. It had been torn straight down the middle, roughly, by hand, on a cold night a year ago. And in the hall, Prince Adwile reached into his robe and drew out a piece of cloth. It was old. It was faded. It was torn down one side, and the tear was ragged, the way cloth tears when somebody rips it in the dark with their hands because there is no knife. He held it up so the whole hall could see it. "The woman I am marrying today," he said, "has the other half of this. Stay with me to the end of this one." A year earlier, on a cold night at the end of the rains, a 19-year-old girl was sent out of her own house to gather firewood in the dark. That is not a normal thing to do. Nobody in that village gathered firewood at night. You gather it in the afternoon, like a sensible person. But Temilade had let a pot of soup burn that evening, and her stepmother had a way of turning small mistakes into long punishments. "There is no wood," Abbasid said, "so go and find some." "Mama, it is dark." "Then you will be careful." So Temilade took a rope and went out of the compound with no lamp, along the path toward the river where the dead branches came down. And she was not frightened exactly, because she had done it before. But she was cold, and she was tired, and she was wearing one thin wrapper because that was all she had. Her father had been dead for 6 years. His name was Ogundip, and he had been a decent man and not a rich one. And when he died, Temilade had been 13. And her stepmother had looked at the girl and made a calculation that a great many stepmothers have made before her. "There is one house here, and there are 2 daughters, and only one of them is mine." She never beat her. That is worth saying. Abbasid was far too careful for that. She simply made Temilade the one who worked the water, the fire, the pounding, the sweeping, the farm, and made her own daughter Yuande the one who was seen. Yuande got the cloth. Yuande went to market. Yuande sat in the front at gatherings, and Temilade stayed in the yard. And after 6 years of it, most people in that village had genuinely stopped noticing she was there. So there she was, on the river path in the dark, and she was almost at the fallen tree she was aiming for when she heard the horse. It was standing in the path, riderless, its head down, shifting. A good horse. She could see that even in the dark, the way you can see it, in the shape of a thing. And 10 paces beyond it, a man was lying in the grass at the side of the road, trying to get up and not managing it. Temilade did what most people would honestly not do. She went toward him. He was, perhaps, 25. He had come off the horse badly, and his leg was wrong. Not broken through, but wrong enough that when he tried to put weight on it, his whole face changed. He had a cut above his eye. He was well dressed, but his clothes were mud to the shoulder, and there was nobody with him. "Can you stand?" she said. "I have been trying for an hour." She got under his arm, and they tried it twice. And the second time he made a sound he was clearly ashamed of, and they both stopped. "I cannot carry you," Temilade said. "I am sorry. You are twice my size. I know, and I cannot leave you here." She was already looking around at the ground. "There are animals on this path at night. If you lie here alone until morning, something will come and look at you. Then go and fetch someone. That is 2 hours there 2 hours back, and I would be bringing them to a place I cannot describe in the dark." She was pulling dry sticks toward her while she said it, quickly, with the flat competence of a person who has been doing chores since she was 7. "No, I will make a fire." He watched her. "And then what?" "And then I will sit beside it until the sun comes up," she said. "And nothing will come near you, because nothing comes near fire." It took her a long time to get it lit, but she got it lit. They talked, on and off, through that night, not about anything. He asked where she was from, and she said, "The village." He asked what she was doing on that path at that hour, and she said, "Gathering firewood." And he laughed, and then realized she was not joking, and stopped. Around the middle of the night he started shivering, and that frightened her more than the animals did, because a man who is hurt and cold in the dark can slip away from you very quietly. She had one wrapper. She took it off her head, and she looked at it for a moment, and then she took it in both hands and tore it straight down the middle. She put half over him and kept half for herself, and neither of them said anything about it. 3 times that night he asked her name. The first time she pretended not to hear. The second time she said, "It doesn't matter." And the third time, near dawn, when he asked properly, when he turned his head and looked at her and said, "Please, I would like to know who did this," Temilade said the thing she had been taught to say for 6 years, without even thinking about it. "I am nobody, sir. Go back to sleep." At first, Light his people found him. 4 men on horses came up that road hard, and there was shouting, and one of them was crying with relief, and they had him up and onto a horse in about a minute. Temilade picked up her rope and her half-wrapper and went home, and got there before Abbasid was properly awake, and was beaten with words for 2 days about the firewood she had not brought. She did not tell anybody. Who would she tell? If you are already angry, if you already want that woman to answer for what she has just done, then do me one small kindness before we go on. Tap the like button, and tell me in the comments the name of the town or country where you are watching from, and subscribe to our family. Because a year from now the prince is going to stand at his own wedding and ask one question, and what happens next? Nobody in that hall sees coming. His name was Adwell, and he was the prince of that province, and he had been riding home alone at night, because he was 25 and stubborn, and had told his escort to go on ahead. He was in bed for 5 weeks, and for 4 of those 5 weeks he talked about the same thing so often that his mother began to lose patience with him. A girl on the road. Adwell, yes. She sat there all night, mother. She had one wrapper. She tore it in half. You have told me. I asked her name 3 times. You have told me that as well. And when he could walk, the first thing he did before the accounts, before the courts, before anything, was send a man to that village. The man he sent was an old palace gatekeeper named Baba Sunmola, who had been at that palace 40 years and could be trusted with something delicate. His instruction was simple. Go to that village, ask after a young woman who gathers firewood at night, who has half a torn wrapper, and bring her name back. Baba Sunmola went. He was gone for days, and when he came back he said, "My prince, there is no such girl in that village. Here is what actually happened." Baba Sunmola arrived in the afternoon and did the sensible thing, which was to go to the largest compound on the eastern side and ask the woman of the house. Villages have people you ask. Abbasid was one of them. Respected, well-spoken, generous in public, in exactly the right amounts. And she stood in her gateway and listened to an old man from the palace describe a girl who gathered firewood at night and had torn her wrapper in half for a stranger on the road. And in the time it takes to breathe twice, Abbasid understood 3 things. That this was Temilade, that the palace wanted her, and that if the palace got her, everything in that compound, the house, the land, the standing went with her. There is no girl like that here, she said. Baba Sunmola asked at 4 other compounds that day and got nothing, because Temilade had not been seen at a market or a gathering in 3 years and a half. That village had genuinely forgotten she existed. He asked at the river. He asked 2 old men. Then he went home and told the prince the truth as he understood it. And Adwell sat with that for a long time and eventually accepted it. Because what else do you do? Inside that compound, things changed the same evening. Temilade was not told anything. She simply noticed that she was no longer allowed to go to the stream or to market, or to church, or anywhere at all. Yuhande did those things now? Abbasid said it was because the girl was careless and people talked. For a year, Temilade did not go past that gate. The word came at the beginning of harvest. The prince would marry. And this was the part that turned 4 villages upside down. He had asked that the bride come from that district, not from the capital, not from a great family. From here, every household with an unmarried daughter went mad. Abbasid did not go mad. Abbasid sat down and thought, and then she moved faster and better than anybody else in that district, because she had one enormous advantage. She was the only person alive who knew why the prince was looking here. She put Yuande forward. She put her forward hard new cloth, the right elder spoken to, a gift to the right man's wife, and she told her daughter a version of the story that was almost true. That a year ago the prince had been helped on the road by a girl from this village, that he had never seen her face properly in the dark, and that any sensible girl would let him believe it was her. Yuhande was 21. She was not a cruel person. She had grown up soft in that house, while another girl carried the water, and she had never once asked why, the way you never ask about the thing that is good for you. She said yes. And on the morning of the wedding, while the compound was full of women and cloth and noise, Abbasid did the last thing. She sent Temilade to the grain store behind the kitchen to fetch a measure of rice, and when the girl was inside, she pushed the door shut and dropped the bar across it. She did not say anything. That is what Temilade remembered afterwards, that there was no shouting, no accusation, nothing, just the sound of the bar going down, and then her stepmother's footsteps walking away across the yard. Temilade pushed at it twice. Then she stopped and sat down on the floor with her back against the door, in the dark, with the sound of drums coming faintly across the compound. She had half a wrapper on her head. She had worn it every day for a year, because it was the only cloth she had, and because, though she would not have said this out loud to anybody, it was the only night of her life when somebody had asked her name, as though the answer mattered. The hall was full. Custom in that province is very clear. The bride is veiled from the moment she enters until the moment of the vow. Nobody sees her face, not the guests, not the elders, not the groom. It is meant to be the last small mystery of the day. Adwile had not asked for that, but he had not objected to it either, because he had a plan of his own, and the veil suited it perfectly. He had told exactly one person. Baba Sunmola, standing at the back of that hall by the door, was the only man in the building who knew what was about to happen. The drums stopped. The bride was brought forward. Abbasid walked beside her in cloth that had cost more than she could afford, and her face, several people remarked on this later, was the face of a woman who was already won, and the prince did not lift the veil. "Before I lift this," he said, "I want to ask you one question." The murmur went round the hole. "A year ago, on a road outside your village, I was thrown from my horse. A woman found me. She could not carry me, so she built a fire and sat beside it all night so that nothing would come near me. When she saw I was cold, she took the only wrapper she owned and tore it in half and put half of it over me." He let that sit. Nobody in that hall was breathing loudly. I asked her name 3 times that night. 3 times. He looked at the veiled woman. The 3rd time, "What did you say to me?" "My prince," said Abbasid quickly. "She is only shy the day is heavy. She has been fasting since I am not asking you." The silence came back, and it was worse. You could see the shape of it moving through that crowd. 300 people beginning to understand, all at slightly different speeds, that something was very wrong at the front of this room. "It is a simple question," said Aid. His voice had not risen at all, which was somehow far worse. "You were there, or you were not. What did you say to me the 3rd time?" And Abbasid leaned in toward her daughter and whispered something urgently into the side of the veil. And Yuande, who had been standing perfectly still for a long time, lifted both her hands, and took hold of her own veil, and pulled it off her head. The gasp in that hall was enormous. "You do not do that. The bride does not unveil herself." Yuande stood there with the cloth in her hands, and her face bare in front of 300 people, and she was shaking so badly she could hardly hold it. "I don't know," she said. "Yuande," her mother's voice was low and terrible. I don't know what she said to you the third time, Yuande said, louder, to the prince. Because it was not me. I have never met you. I have never been on that road at night in my life. Her voice broke completely. I have never gathered firewood in my life. She turned and looked at her mother. I said yes to this 2 weeks ago, and I have not slept since, and I am not going to stand in front of all these people and say a vow on top of it. Nobody moved. Prince Adwell looked at this young woman for a moment. And what he said next. People in that district repeated 4 years afterwards, because it was not what anybody expected. Thank you, he said quietly. That took more than anything else that has happened in this hall today. Then he turned to the elders, and to the crowd, and he reached into his robe and took out a piece of cloth. He held it up high. It was old, and faded, and torn down one side, and the tier was not cut. It was ragged and uneven, the way cloth tears when somebody rips it in the dark with their hands. This is half of a wrapper, he said. The woman who did that for me on the road has the other half. I've been carrying this for a year. He turned slowly, so the whole hall saw it. So I'm asking in front of all of you, is she here? And a small voice at the side of the hall, a child, perhaps 8 years old, who had been sent with a message and had been standing there for some minutes with her mouth open, said, There is a girl locked in the grain store. Everything stopped. What? The child pointed. Behind the kitchen, in the compound, Auntie Abbasid put the bar down this morning. I saw her, and 300 people turned, all at once, and looked at Abbasid. They went out of that hall, in a wave. Not walking, the whole wedding, elders, drummers, women in their best cloth, the prince himself limping slightly on a leg that has never been quite right since a night on a river road went across that compound to a mud store behind the kitchen with a wooden bar across the door. Baba Sunmola got there first and lifted it, and Temilade came out. She came out squinting, because it was bright, and she had been in the dark for 4 hours. She had rice dust on her arms. She was wearing a plain brown work wrapper, because it was the only cloth she had, and because she had worn it every day for a year, was a piece of old faded cloth, torn down one side. The tear was ragged and uneven. The prince stood in front of her, and he could not speak for a moment. He was a young man in his own wedding robes, standing in a dusty compound in front of 300 people. And he had to try twice. I asked your name 3 times, he said. Temilade looked at him, and she was tired and confused, and had been locked in a store all morning, and had absolutely no idea what was happening. But she remembered that night better than she remembered anything else in her life. I know, she said. What did you say? And Temilade said, I said I am nobody, sir. Go back to sleep. Adwale closed his eyes. Then he lifted the half-wrapper in his hand and reached out very carefully and took the edge of the cloth from her head and held the 2 pieces together in front of everybody. The tier matched. Of course, it matched. Every ragged notch of it, all the way down. Let it sit there for a moment. A whole wedding standing in a dusty compound in their best cloth. A grain store with the bar lying in the dirt beside it. A prince holding 2 halves of a torn wrapper together in his hands, in front of 300 people, and they fit, every notch of them fit. And a girl standing in a doorway with rice dust on her arms, who has been in that yard for 6 years, while the whole village walked past her, and who is only now, this second, beginning to understand that for 1 entire year a man has been carrying half of her only wrapper against his chest and asking everybody he met if anyone knew her name. Abbasid tried. You have to give her that. She came forward with her hands out and her face already arranged, saying that she had not known, that the girl was strange and difficult, that the store was for her own safety, that she had raised the child from 13. And this was Baba Sunmola, said the prince, without turning round. Come here. The old gatekeeper came forward. A year ago I sent you to that village. Tell them what you did. I went, my prince. The old man's voice carried. I went first to the largest compound on the eastern side, as anyone would. I asked the woman of that house whether there was a young woman in the village who gathered firewood at night and had torn her wrapper in half for a man on the road. He turned and looked at Abbasid, and she told me there was no such girl. The sound that went through that compound was not a gasp. It was lower and uglier than that, because now everybody could count. It was not a swapped bride. It was not a locked door on a wedding morning. It was a year in which that woman had looked at a girl in her own yard every single day, and Nonan said nothing and kept her behind that gate. Temilade did not cry. Several people mentioned that afterwards she stood in the doorway of that store with half a wrapper in her hand and looked at her stepmother for a long moment, and then she said, "You knew. All that year, every day." Abbasid did not answer, which was the answer. And here is where the story could have ended in the ordinary way, and did not, because when the elders began to move, and they were moving, with the whole province watching, toward the kind of judgment that ends, a woman, Temilade, said, "No." They stopped. "Keep the house," she said to Abbasid. "Keep the land. Keep the compound. Keep all. I am not going to spend one more hour of my life fighting you for a yard I have already swept 10,000 times." She was very steady. "But understand what you have actually lost. For a year you made sure nobody in this village knew my name." She looked around at 300 people who were all, every one of them, looking back at her. "That is finished. As of today, everybody knows it, and you will live in this village, in that house, for the rest of your life, and every single person who passes that gate will know exactly what you did to keep a girl from being asked her name." She turned and looked at Yuande, who was standing to one side holding her own veil in both hands, unable to look at anybody. "And I want her with me." Yuan's head came up. "You could have stood there and said one sentence and you would have been a princess by sundown," Temilade said. "You took it off instead." "In front of everyone?" She almost smiled. "You are the only person in this compound who has ever told the truth when it cost you something. Come with me." They were married the following month. In the same hall, Witutavel Temilade would not have won, and the elders let it go. She was 19 when she went into that palace, and she was there for 51 years, and the thing she is remembered for in that province has nothing to do with the wedding at all. It is this: any woman who walked to that palace gate could ask to be heard, and would be, and Baba Sunemala stood at that gate for another 9 years, and let every single one of them in. When people asked her why she had made that rule, she always said the same thing: "Because I know what it is to be somebody nobody asks about." Yuande lived at the palace, married a good man late, and told that story at her own children's weddings, including her own part in it, and never once made herself sound better than she was. Abbasid kept the house. She lived another 12 years in it. Nobody drove her out, and nobody ever really spoke to her again, and both of those things were exactly what had been decided in that compound. And the wrapper? Temilade had the two halves sewn back together, badly, by hand. Herself, in a palace full of women who could have done it better. She kept it in a wooden box beside the bed for 51 years, and when her granddaughters asked about the ugly seam down the middle, she would take it out and put it in their hands and say, "That is where I gave half of everything I had to a stranger in the dark, and it came back to me whole." For the elders of that province tell their children, to this day, a saying that was born in that compound, that a name is the smallest thing a person owns and the last thing they can be robbed of. You can take a woman's house and her land and her mother's cloth off her back. You can shut her behind a gate for a year so that nobody sees her face. But the moment one person asks her name and means it, everything you built comes apart, because you were never really keeping her poor. You were keeping her unknown. And nothing stays unknown forever. Kindness given in the dark, where nobody is watching and there is nothing at all to gain, does not disappear. It goes out into the world and it walks about, and it looks for the person who gave it, sometimes for a year, sometimes longer. And when it finally finds them, it is astonishing how much of it there turns out to be. If Temilade's story moved you, if you believe that what you give when nobody is watching always finds its way home, then do something for me now. Type the word nobody in the comments, so I know this story reached you. Share it with someone who has been giving quietly for years and thinks nobody has noticed. Subscribe to our family if you have not yet, so you never miss a story. And I will see you in the next one.